continue on with the world's great speeches. Oh, and hello again. Today we read the words of Hannibal. In the spirit of honesty, I did skip a speech by someone who is known as Cato the Elder. Cato was a censor, and as elder, to distinguish him from his grandson, he was a Roman censor who hated Carthage. He was famous for ending every speech, "Carthage must be destroyed." However, we're not going to read his speech because it is in defense of something called the Opium Law. So that I can justify myself, I'd like to tell you exactly what the Opium Law is. If you wish to read the speech, you can read it. Just look up Cato the Elder in support of the Opium Law. This was a law that imposed certain controls on what women were allowed to wear. Cato spoke vehemently against this because I assume he was had some strong opinions about what women were allowed to wear. To Rome's credit, I don't know exactly when this speech was, but the repressive measure was removed. So, I don't really want to hear Cato the Elder talk about why any group of people deserves to be restricted in their self-expression when it comes to what they wear. It's a bit ridiculous. But the speech is there if you'd like to read it. We're moving strictly on to, in a twist of irony, Cato the Elder's sworn enemy Hannibal, the famous Carthaginian general. Carthaginian as in Carthage, right? So, he delivered this speech to his soldiers after his army had crossed the Alps and entered Italy in 218 BC. If, soldiers, you shall by and by, in judging of your own fortune, preserve the same feelings which you experienced a little before in the example of the fate of others, we have already conquered. For neither was that merely a spectacle, but, as it were, a certain representation of your condition. And I know not whether fortune has thrown around you still stronger chains and more urgent necessities than around your captives, on the right and left to seize and close you, without your possessing a single ship for escape. The river Po around you, the Po larger and more impetuous than the Rhone, the Alps behind, scarcely passed by you when you were fresh and vigorous, hem you in. Here, soldiers, where you have first met the enemy, you must conquer or die. And in the same fortune which has imposed the necessity of fighting, holds out to you, if victorious, rewards than which men are not wont to desire greater, even from the immortal gods. If we were only about to recover by our valor Sicily and Sardinia, wrested from our fathers, the recompense would be sufficiently ample. But whatever acquired and amassed by so many triumphs the Romans possess, all, with its masters themselves, will become yours. To gain this rich reward, hasten then and seize your arms with the favor of the gods. Long enough in pursuing cattle among the desert mountains of Lusitania and Celtiberia, you have seen no emolument from so many toils and dangers. It is time to make rich and profitable campaigns, and to gain the great reward of your labors, after having accomplished such a length of journey over so many mountains and rivers, and so many nations in arms. Here, fortune has granted you the termination of your labors. Here she will bestow a reward worthy of the service you have undergone. Nor, in proportion as the war is great in name, ought you to consider that the victory will be difficult. A despised enemy has often maintained a sanguinary contest, and renowned states and kings have been conquered by a very slight effort. For, setting aside only the splendor of the Roman name, what remains in which they can be compared to you? To pass over in silence your service for 20 years, distinguished by such valor and success, you have made your way to this place from the Pillars of Hercules, from the ocean and the remotest limits of the world, advancing victorious through so many of the fiercest nations of Gaul and Spain. You will fight with a raw army, which this very summer was beaten, conquered, and surrounded by the Gauls, as yet unknown to its general and ignorant of him. Shall I compare myself, almost born and certainly bred in the tent of my father, that most illustrious commander, myself the subjugator of Spain and Gaul, to conquer too not only of the Alpine nations, but, what is much more, of the Alps themselves, with this 6 months general, this deserter of his army, to whom, if anyone, having taken away their standards, should today show the Carthaginians and Romans, I am sure that he would not know of which army he was consul. I do not regard its soldiers as of small account, that there is not a man among you before whose eyes I have not often achieved some military exploit, and to whom in like manner I, the spectator and witness of his valor, could not recount his own gallant deeds, particularized by time and place. With soldiers who have 1,000 times received my praises and gifts, I, who was the pupil of you all before I became your commander, will march out in battle array against those who are unknown to and ignorant of each other. On whatever side I turn my eyes, I see nothing but what is full of courage and energy, of veteran infantry, cavalry, both those with and those without the bridle, composed of the most gallant nations. You, our most faithful and valiant allies, you Carthaginians, who are about to fight as well for the sake of your country as from the justest resentment. We are the assailants in the war, and descend into Italy with hostile standards, about to engage, so much more boldly and bravely than the foe, as the confidence and courage of the assailants are greater than those of him who is defensive. Besides, suffering, injury, and indignity inflame and excite our minds. They first demanded me, your leader, for punishment, and then all of you who had laid siege to Saguntum. And we have been given up. And had we been given up, they would have visited us with the severest tortures. That most cruel and haughty nation considers everything its own, and at its own disposal. It thinks it right that it should regulate with whom we are to have war, with whom peace. It circumscribes and shuts us up by the boundaries of mountains and rivers which we must not pass, and then does not adhere to those boundaries which it has appointed. Pass not to Iberius, you have nothing to do with the Sangunites. Saguntum is on the Iberius. you must not take a step in any direction? Is it a small thing that you take away my most ancient provinces, Sicily and Sardinia? Will you take Spain also? And should I withdraw thence, will you cross over into Africa? Will cross, did I say? They have sent the 2 consuls of this year, one to Africa, the other to Spain. There is nothing left to us in any quarter except what we can assert to ourselves by arms. Those may be cowards and dastards who have something to look back upon, whom, flying through safe and unmolested roads, their own lands and their own country will receive. There is a necessity for you to be brave, and since between victory and death is broken off from you by inevitable despair, either to conquer if fortune should waver, to meet death rather in battle than in flight. If this be well fixed and determined in the minds of you, I will repeat, you have already conquered. No stronger incentive to victory has been given to man by the immortal gods. This was a very short one, so I think it deserves a little more scrutiny. He opens by saying, if soldiers, you shall, in judging your own fortune, preserve the same feelings which you experienced a little before. We have already conquered. Okay, so he says, listen, soldiers. Remember the way you felt when we conquered the enemies behind us. So still must you feel about the enemies before us. Not only because it must be so, but also because fortune has thrown around you still stronger chains and more urgent necessities than around your captives, the Romans. The enemy lies before us, to our right and to our left, are seas enclosing us, and behind us a range of mountains that prevent our flight. We have rivers around either of our sides too. He then goes on to say, here, soldiers, where you have first met the enemy, you must conquer or die, and the same fortune which has imposed the necessity of fighting holds out on you. If victorious, you will receive great and mighty benefits. The Romans possess all, so if we possess the Romans, we too will become the masters of their dominions. We will gain rich reward. Hasten then and seize your arms. Think of the road behind you. Long enough you trudged through the desert mountain of Lusitania and Celtiberia. You were not spared any toil or danger. Now it is time to make a rich profit from all of that work. It is time to gain the reward of your labors after having accomplished such a length of journey over so many mountains and rivers. He says, here, fortune has granted you the termination of your labors. And make no mistake, there is a great reward in front. And then he makes a point. Yes, this is a great war, but that does not mean that destroying the last of our enemies in Rome will require a great effort. Many kingdoms have been conquered by a slight effort. If you set aside the splendor of the Roman name, how truly do they compare to you? You have served me for 20 years and have only succeeded. And you will fight with an army that has no experience. It was beaten this very summer by the Gauls. It is led by an incompetent general. I was born a soldier and worked myself up to command. And we face in a lesser army with a general that is only 6 months and has previously deserted, a losing army. says, we can win this. And then he goes on to say, I do not regard. Okay, I'm not going to use his words. He has a small paragraph where he basically introduces the two sides of a coin sort of thing. He said, you look at me and you see a man who has conquered many times before your eyes, and I look at you, I see a soldier who has performed valiantly every time my command demanded it. Our enemy is not so united as I to you and you to me. He says he looks around, he sees nothing but courage and energy, veteran infantry and cavalry. You are all Carthaginians now, and we are about to fight for the sake of our name. We are the assailants, we are the aggressors, and we descend as we must, boldly and bravely. We must be such in order to take out the object of our force. And on the other side, he says, besides, imagine how we would have fared had we lost at the last siege in Saguntum. If we had given up, we would have met with the severest tortures. So he paints a clear picture. Listen, we fought very hard to get where we are, and now it is time to win. Where exactly are we? Well before us, our incompetent enemy lays waiting to be slain, and to all other sides are obstacles that prevent our retreat. If we win great things, and if we lose, we shall be tortured severely. I mean, it seems pretty clear what it is to be done now. He then rails against Rome, calling Rome the most cruel and haughty nation that considers everything its own. Look at how they have treated us. They shut us up behind boundaries of mountains and rivers, and yet violates those very boundaries. They have abused us in their treatment. What should we do then, when you take Spain also and other places? And should he still withdraw, would you cross into Africa? He says to them, they have sent their consuls to Africa and Spain, and if their consuls win, essentially reinforcements, there is no winning this war. We cannot be cowardly. We must not look back. He says, ending it, that there is a necessity for you to be brave. All between victory and death is broken off from you by inevitable despair. Beautiful line. Your only options are victory and death is basically what he's saying, but it's much more beautiful to say all between victory and death is broken off from you by inevitable despair. He says we either conquer or meet death in battle. I will repeat now, you have already conquered. No stronger incentive to victory has been given to man. So, he makes a point, essentially, that we standing here could not possibly be more motivated to win. First of all, we cannot retreat. Second of all, we are sure to succeed should we strike now in the appropriate fashion. Thirdly, if we lose, we shall be tortured. Fourthly, if we win, we shall inherit unfathomable power. Certainly a persuasive argument, and I know that Rome was very nearly humbled by Carthage more than once. It was probably because, in part, they had leaders such as Hannibal. Time would obviously prove Rome the greater what it was. I do remember hearing at one point that Rome was surrounded for years at a time, but never taken. So there's valor on the other side of that conflict too. Perhaps the people within the walls are not so, what is the word? Are not so ignorant and easily conquered. But all the same, it was interesting. I'd like to look up that thing. Let me see if I look up Hannibal 218. It should come up. Hannibal, American thriller series. No, 218 BC. There we are. In 218, Hannibal attacked Saguntum. An ally of Rome in Hispania, sparking the Second Punic War. Okay, so this speech was given just after the Second Punic War was to begin. This was given right after they captured this city of Saguntum, and he said to his soldiers, okay, it is war, we must go. Let's see how the Second Punic War went. The second of 3 wars. After immense material and human losses on both sides, the Carthaginians were defeated. Well, it was a nice speech after all, but it does not look like they won. It was a 17-year-long war, fought primarily in Italy and Iberia, but also in Sicily and Sardinia, and towards the end of the war in North Africa. He did make such warnings that would happen. And the result of the Carthaginians' defeat, Macedonia, Syracuse, and several Numidian kingdoms were drawn into fighting. Oh, never mind. Okay, so there was a lot of people fighting on either side. There were 3 main military theaters. Italy, where Hannibal defeated Roman legions repeatedly. Iberia, where Hannibal's brother defended the Carthaginian colonial cities with mixed success, before moving into Italy and Africa, where Rome finally won the war. The First Punic War ended in a Roman victory. So, as we know, Hannibal besieged, sacked, and captured the pro-Roman city of Saguntum. Rome declared war in response. Hannibal surprised the Romans by marching overland. He motivated them to do just that via the words that we just heard. Through Gaul over the Alps, reinforced by Gallic allies, he obtained crushing victories in Trebia and Lake Trasimene, moving to southern Italy a year later in 216. The years go the other way because it's BC. Hannibal again defeated the Romans at Cannae, where he annihilated the largest Roman army ever assembled. More than 120,000 Roman troops died in less than 3 years. Hannibal then controlled much of southern Italy. Syracuse and Macedonia joined the Carthaginian side. Between 215 and 210, the Carthaginians attempted to capture Roman-held Sicily and Sardinia, but that is where they encountered their first difficulty. The Romans took drastic steps to raise new legions, enrolling slaves and criminals. Not great, but it is war, so I don't know why I expected humane behavior for the next decade after Rome did that. The war cities that adjoined Carthage. Romans then established themselves in 218 in northeast Iberia. The Carthaginians repeatedly attempted and failed to reduce or get rid of their settlement. This went on for 7 more years until 211, where the Romans took the offensive but were badly defeated. They still managed to maintain their hold that they had established. Things stalemated for about 2 more years, until 209. Roman commander Publius Scipio captured Carthago Nova, the main Carthaginian base in the peninsula. In 208, a year later, Scipio defeated Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal, although Hasdrubal was able to withdraw most of his troops. They regathered themselves into a new invasion, but were defeated at the Battle of Metaurus, and the Battle of Ilipa in 206 permanently ended the Carthaginian presence in Iberia, so Hannibal was nearly able to win, but Rome went to extraordinary measures and was able to drive Hannibal out slowly. That new Roman commander, Scipio, that we heard of, then invaded Carthaginian Africa, and the Carthaginian Senate recalled Hannibal's army from Italy. This led to the final engagement of the war, where the armies of Scipio and Hannibal met at Zama in 202. Hannibal was soundly defeated and Carthage sued for peace. The peace treaty dictated by Rome stripped Carthage of all overseas territory and charged them a lot of money. Carthage was prohibited from waging war. Henceforth, it was clear Carthage was politically subordinate to Rome. Rome then used Carthaginian military activity against the Numidians as a pretext to declare war, and then they stormed Carthage, sacked it, and slaughtered most of its population, then razed the entire city, sowing salt into the soil. Ouch. It was nice to get the historical context, but I do wish that Hannibal had been able to pull it off. I mean, if we look at the First Punic War, who started that one? Okay, yeah, it was Roman aggression. Not surprised, right? So, Roman aggression wanted to expand. Carthage was in the way. They declared war. They won. Hannibal decided to start the Second Punic War to try to make up for those losses. He very nearly succeeded, but then was defeated when Romans went to extraordinary measures. And, I'm not saying Hannibal didn't, destroy some cities or whatnot. He probably did some shitty stuff, too. These were both probably terrible men by modern standards. That's what it took. Back in the ancient world, it's a different world. I think we forget that sometimes. Anyway, Roman aggression started a war which Carthage lost. They imposed terms on Carthage which Carthage found to be intolerable. They declared war. They started a second war, which they then unfortunately lost. I must say, despite all the nasty stuff that I was just saying about, Rome's nasty, that was your chance. If you're Carthage, that was your one chance. Rome's an aggressive force. You decided to be aggressive against them. You have to defeat them in that war, and he did not. They yet again imposed even more restrictive peace upon Carthage, which Carthage observed. But Rome still really could not abide by Carthaginian presence, so they basically invented a war in order to destroy Carthage. And as an American citizen, I can't exactly rail most of the western part of North America. We invented a war that we had always wanted to fight, and we took out our ambition against those people. Truly disgusting behavior. So, with that new context, I think it's cool that this speech was what inspired a truly heroic march down through Italy. And it is a shame that they were not able to secure for themselves the, what is the word? The rewards that they wanted. What was the word he used? I wish that they had been able to secure for themselves rewards which men are not wanted to desire greater, even from the immortal gods. For the sake of the speech, it would have been nice if Carthage won, but Carthage did not win. Anyway, if you're still listening and you're not yet asleep, thank you, and have a good night.